I want to first start out and thank Dr. David Milch for making this happen, Ruby Shamir, Dan Gillerman, people who I worked closely with in the past and who have given so much to the America-Israel Friendship League. You know, I want to start out and talk briefly about, one, how did this happen, October 7th? Arrogance. Arrogance on our part. And how do I define arrogance? When you think you know better what the enemy says than their own words. They have told us what they're going to do. Hamas's charter is clear. And why is it that Israel didn't pay attention? They violated the basic rules of warfare. Never underestimate your enemy, never hold them in contempt, and never think you're smarter than them. So why is that important now? Because October 7th happened. Because who orchestrated this? Iran. When are we going to wake up? When a nuclear bomb is dropped on Tel Aviv? Jewish people know anything. It's that when bad people say they're going to do things, they mean it. Pay attention. They mean it. Our adversaries always tell us what they're going to do. Sadat said many times he was going to attack Sinai and in many training exercises. Saddam Hussein said he was going into Kuwait. Our enemies tell us what they're going to do. And it's kind of, if there was a psychologist here, I think the Jewish people need some kind of psychoanalysis because we get into denial. She's laughing. Marielle, who I'm going to introduce soon. We go into this denial. You know what the best story is that makes me think of that? In 1944, a Jew escaped Auschwitz and ended up in Budapest, which in 1944 was not being massacred, the Jewish people, as what happened later. By 1944, the Jewish community in Hungary was largely intact. And this Jew who escaped Auschwitz went in front of the Jewish Community Council in Budapest and told them in detail what he saw at Auschwitz. Now, he was traumatized. He was a neurotic guy, waving his hands a lot. And at the end of it, when the Jewish leaders heard him and met, they said, not believable. He's crazy. This is what we go through in history. So if there's anything we have to learn out of this is that our enemies tell us they want to destroy us like Iran. Go on the website, Memory. Do you think you're smarter than them? Do you think you know better what they are going to do than their own words? I don't think so. So unless we ultimately go after Iran, we will see more experiences of this. And think about Israel. Israel has said that they can no longer live with Hamas on their border. Well, they can no longer live with Hezbollah on their border. Hezbollah is even more powerful and has more weapons than Hamas by a level of 10 times. So it should not be a question of if, it should be a question of when. Because they will mass across the border with thousands of fighters, just like Hamas did. What are we waiting for? Now, it may take a year, 2 years, whatever it takes for Israel to plan, but be awake and do what has to be done. Now, when we think of the Holocaust, up until now, that was the personification of evil. You couldn't almost imagine anything worse than that. And it still is, but there are some differences now. Even during the Holocaust, rarely did they conduct individual torture. It was mostly a massive, systematic industrial murder of the Jewish people as efficiently as possible. That's what Auschwitz was. Here, Hamas, and they hid their crimes. Here, Hamas shows it off, which will be a big mistake on their part, because they gave us an odd gift. They gave us proof, which most people would dismiss as they're doing even now. So we have to be alert, and we have to be aware that we have enemies, and they want to kill us. And I know it's extremely uncomfortable to hear this, because it means we have to make really hard decisions, and there's going to be damage and suffering, but we have to get out of collective denial. And when you think of the Holocaust, I want to give you one thought. To honor the victims. If you had to spend 1 minute with each member, with each person who died in the Holocaust, any idea how long that would take? 6 million people died, 1 minute with each person who died in the Holocaust? 11 years and 4 months. 11 years and 4 months. And now I want to shift to what happened with Hamas and why this is not about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's not at all, not whatsoever. Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinians. Why is it there's not one air raid shelter in Gaza? Not one. And the tunnels, Hamas leaders said on television, it's for the Hamas fighters, not for the people of Gaza. Israel and the UN could take care of the people of Gaza. And why is it that the top 3 leaders of Hamas are worth $11 billion and living in the good life in Doha, Qatar? So they clearly don't care about the Palestinian people. And that has to be talked about. Because everybody's reducing it out there that this is about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And you can contextualize evil. One of the speakers said earlier about the United Nations, they say things like, well, there's context to this, or Israel needs to pay attention to the Palestinians. That's an anti-Semitic statement. It's basically saying you got what you deserved. You didn't pay enough attention to it. That's anti-Semitism. And you know, we're experiencing this in a horrific way, but there is some good news. We're awake. We've never been more united than we are now. Israel is not going through its second war of independence. This is not 1948. 1948, Israel really had nothing. They lost 2% of its population, which would have been the equivalent of 2 million Americans dying in Vietnam when 50,000 died. That's not what's happening. Israel is awake, and we have to make it our mission to do a few things to move forward and live the life that we deserve without fear of being murdered or raped and so on. And that is, 1, education. Israel can't accept the status quo. Hamas is teaching their kids to hate Jews. Do you know what I recently discovered which so shocked me? That they ended up bringing religious leaders to indoctrinate the Hamas fighters to deliberately inflict as much pain as possible when they killed them. Extraordinary. And that's a big part of what they did. Without going on any more, I want to be able to introduce an honored guest that we have here, Moriel. Moriel, if you would come up. Her nephew, Adar, was murdered on October 7th. Brutally murdered. I give you Moriel.